John and Laura, a couple, were having lunch at a restaurant in Venice. John noticed two women, identical twins, sitting at a nearby table and jokingly told Laura that they were male twins in drag, criminals on the run. Laura played along, pretending to be interested in the twins, and eventually she decided to follow one of them to the restroom to see if she would change her wig. The twin, dressed in masculine attire, was not remarkable on her own, but her identical twin sister made them stand out. John and Laura continued to joke about the twins, imagining they were jewel thieves or murderers. However, Laura eventually realized that the twins were harmless, retired schoolmistresses from Australia named Tilly and Tiny. As Laura followed one of the twins to the restroom, she discovered that the woman claimed to have a psychic sister who had seen their deceased daughter, Christine. The woman told Laura that her sister had seen Christine sitting between John and Laura, laughing. Laura was overjoyed, believing that this was a sign that Christine was still with them. John was worried about Laura's reaction, thinking she might be going crazy, but he played along, trying to soothe her. Laura was convinced that the twins were telling the truth and that Christine was still with them, which brought her great happiness. John and Laura were on a vacation in Venice. They decided to visit Torcello, where they met twin sisters who claimed to have telepathic abilities. Laura was fascinated by them, but John was skeptical and uneasy. The sisters' blind gaze made him feel creepy. After lunch, they visited the cathedral, where John felt an impending sense of doom when the sisters stared at him. He was relieved when they left, but Laura wanted to find them again. John tried to distract her by buying postcards and suggesting they explore the area. As they walked, Laura mentioned Christine, her deceased daughter, and John felt sad. They eventually returned to Venice, and John was relieved to leave the twins behind. That evening, they decided to dine out, and John wanted to make love to Laura afterwards. They walked around Venice, enjoying the night air, and eventually found a restaurant near the church of San Zaccaria. John and Laura were walking through a maze-like alley in Venice when they heard a cry. They saw a little girl, no more than 5 or 6 years old, jumping from boat to boat, seemingly trying to escape. John was concerned, but Laura didn't see the girl and was getting anxious about the cry. They continued walking, trying to find their way to the Greek Quarter. After asking for directions, they finally arrived at a restaurant near the church of San Zaccaria. Inside, they saw twin sisters, who Laura had met before, and they seemed to be following them. Laura was delighted to see them, but John was suspicious. The sisters claimed to have had a vision from Laura's deceased friend Christine, warning them to leave Venice immediately. John was skeptical, but Laura was convinced. They argued, and John eventually agreed to leave Venice the next day. John and Laura, a couple, were having dinner at a restaurant in Venice when Laura, claiming to have a psychic intuition, insisted they leave immediately. They paid the bill and walked out into the rain, eventually taking shelter in the Piazza San Marco. As they walked, John thought about how the city was slowly dying, and the tourists would one day travel by boat to see the underwater ruins. At their hotel, they received a telegram from the headmaster of their son Johnny's preparatory school, stating that Johnny was under observation for suspected appendicitis. Laura was convinced that this was the reason they had to leave Venice, and John reluctantly agreed. They decided to return home, with Laura taking a charter flight and John following by train with their car. As Laura prepared to leave, John felt anxious and worried about Johnny, but tried not to show it. Laura was frantic to get to her son and didn't want to waste any time. She eventually boarded the charter flight, leaving John behind to pack up their belongings and follow by train. John felt a sense of loss and melancholy as he watched Laura leave, and the hotel room seemed empty and desolate without her. He finished packing, paid the bill, and headed to the ferry to collect their car, feeling depressed and anxious about the long journey ahead. John stepped onto the steam ferry, leaving Venice behind, when he spotted his wife Laura with twin sisters on another ferry. He was shocked, wondering why she hadn't boarded the charter flight as planned. Laura looked distressed, and John assumed the flight had been canceled, and she had met the sisters at the airport. He rushed to telephone the hotel, instructing the reception clerk to detain Laura and tell her to wait for him. However, when John arrived at the hotel, Laura was nowhere to be found. The reception clerk confirmed that Laura hadn't arrived, despite John's insistence that he had seen her on the ferry. The manager telephoned the airport, discovering that the charter flight had taken off on schedule, leaving John baffled. John described the twin sisters to the manager, hopping to find out where they were staying, but the hotel in Torcello, where they had met, didn't know their names. John was left to wait anxiously, wondering if Laura had changed her mind about the flight or if something more sinister was at play. As the hours passed, John became increasingly desperate, searching for Laura and the sisters in San Marco, but to no avail. He considered booking a room at the hotel, unsure of what to do next. John searched for a restaurant where he had dinner the previous night with his wife Laura. He was looking for two sisters who had sat at a corner table. The proprietor remembered the sisters, but didn't know their names or where they were staying. John suspected the sisters might be kidnappers who had taken Laura. Anxious and fearful, John went to the police station, where he met a couple who had lost a handbag. They told him about a murderer on the loose in Venice who had killed 2 people. John lied about losing a suitcase to avoid telling them about Laura's disappearance. John then spoke to a police officer, who listened to his story and suggested that Laura might have had an attack of amnesia and was being taken care of by the sisters. The officer reassured John that they would find Laura. John returned to his hotel, exhausted and worried. He ordered a whiskey and called Johnny's school in England, where he learned that Johnny's operation had been successful. Then, to his surprise, Laura came on the line, calm and clear. John received a call from his wife Laura, who told him that she had arrived safely in England and was staying with friends, the Hills. She also mentioned that Johnny, a mutual friend, was recovering well from surgery. John was relieved but still shaken from his earlier mistake. He had reported Laura missing to the police, claiming he saw her on a vaporetto with 2 sisters, but it turned out to be an hallucination. The sisters, who possessed psychic powers, were innocent and had been wrongly accused. John felt exhausted and embarrassed about the whole ordeal. He decided to have a drink at the bar and then go to dinner at a nearby restaurant. As he sat down to eat, he realized that he needed to face the manager and apologize for the trouble he had caused. However, when he returned to the hotel, he found the manager talking to a police officer. The officer told John that the 2 sisters had been traced and were willing to accompany the police to the Questura. John confessed to the manager and the police officer that he had made a mistake and that Laura was safe in England. The police officer was annoyed, and John offered to go to the Questura to apologize in person. At the police station, John met the 2 sisters, who were upset and distressed by the whole ordeal. He apologized profusely, and the sisters accepted his apology. The police officer was furious and asked John who he had seen on the vaporetto if not Laura and the sisters. John explained that his eyes had deceived him, and he had made a mistake. The police officer was skeptical but eventually let John go with a warning. In Venice, John encountered 2 sisters, one blind, who claimed to possess psychic abilities. After a series of events, John found himself apologizing to the sisters for accusing them of kidnapping his wife, Laura. As they walked through the city, the blind sister revealed that John had seen his wife with them in the future, not the present. The sisters invited John to their home, where the blind sister began to experience a trance state, causing John to leave abruptly. As John navigated through the unfamiliar streets, he stumbled upon a church he had visited with Laura earlier. He decided to take a shortcut through an alley, where he saw a little girl, who had escaped from a man, running towards him. John realized that this was the same girl he had seen the previous night, and suspected that the man might be connected to a series of murders. John followed the girl into a house, where they hid from the pursuer. However, to his shock, the girl turned out to be a 3-foot-tall dwarf woman with an adult head and gray hair. As they hid, they heard the man and others shouting and trying to break into the room. As the creature attacked, a knife flew towards him with incredible force, piercing his throat. He fell, his hands covered in blood. In his final moments, he saw a vision of Laura and the 2 sisters on a vaporetto, cruising down the Grand Canal, but not today or tomorrow, rather the day after. He understood their somber mission. The creature cackled in the corner, while the sounds of hammering, voices, and a barking dog faded away. His last thought was, What a ridiculous way to die.